Hey everyone, Brian and Jeff with WorkshopAddict.com, and Hitachi just came out with a new 7¼ inch worm drive circular saw. And that brought us to a point of why is Hitachi and many other brands trying to break into a market where Skilsaw has had it covered and builds one of the better ones out there for so many years. Our comparison in the shop is the Reese's Peanut Butter Cup. You can buy Reese's Peanut Butter Cups as a brand, or you can find a million other people out there trying to remake it, even homemade.
But it doesn't quite add up to the original.
You can get close,
Close.
but it seems like there's always something in that formula that never makes it just the same. So we wanted to go through all these saws and say, what is the difference? Point them out, look at price, power, all this stuff, give you a video on it, kind of let you know what we found. Let's start out with the saws that we have. First, we have the Skilsaw 15 amp. It is the SP177WM. This is $199 at the Home Depot. The Bosch is a second. Now Bosch at this point in time owns Skilsaw, so we threw it in there. They are dang near identical. It is the CSW41. That one is $209 at the Home Depot. Then we go to the Hitachi, which is the new saw, still a 15 amp. It's $199 at Lowe's. That is the C7WDM. And then last is our Ridgid, which is $169 at Home Depot, and it is the R32104.
The differences between these two and these two, these are 5,300 RPM and these are 5,000 RPM. But
it's not much of a difference when you really look at it.
No, all 7¼ The Skilsaw does, in my mind, knock it out of the park because of the blade it comes with.
It makes the price comparison a little bit more skewed. When you look at most of these are $199, or Bosch is a little more expensive, and the Ridgid is less expensive. But you're right, the blade that comes with this Skilsaw model rocks. And we actually took that blade off and tried it on some of the other saws just to even the playing field.
And the performance of this saw came up with this blade on it.
The performance of the Hitachi did improve, although the performance of the Hitachi was probably the closest to the Skilsaw and the Bosch.
Yes.
The Ridgid, on the other hand, you can hear it.
It definitely doesn't have the power that any of the other three does.
Even with the Diablo blade
on it.
When you go to weight factors on these, they're fairly close, and that was one of the comfort factors that we looked at is weight, how is it balanced. The Ridgid and the Skilsaw and Bosch are between 12.5 and 13 pounds, where the Hitachi is almost 14.5 to 14.7. But the balance is what throws them out.
Yes, it's a noticeable difference with the weight on this one, but it doesn't seem to be balanced. It's heavier to the back of the saw versus any of the other ones. The weight is more centered on these, if that makes sense.
No, I noticed it too when you pick up the Hitachi, the balance, and you can even see the balance on where the center of the blade is compared to the motor on the Hitachi, that it is, the blade's farther forward, the motor's farther back, so it gives you a floating feeling a little bit as you're cutting with it.
Right.
Where the Ridgid, Bosch, and Skilsaw feel they want to give you that point where you're diving right in.
It's a solid performing saw. The handle on the Hitachi felt more comfortable than any of the other saws.
You know, the Ridgid has another different type of their hex grip on this, and it's not bad, but I think if you're used to an actual Skilsaw model, Hitachi came in with a trigger, at least that you would guess maybe is made from the exact same parts.
Yes, the handles are very similar, but you can look at the Ridgid and it's
a little different,
totally
little different feel. Now the other thing that I was looking at in this is how the cords come out the back. You have a long kind of pigtail on the Skilsaw, the Bosch, and the Hitachi, where the Ridgid, the cord's kind of sitting underneath, and that's going to be sliding on your wood all the time. Not a huge difference, guys, but it is definitely something that's out there. But when you look at the inside of the Hitachi, it's made with Phillips screws compared to the rest of them that use Torx bits.
correct.
Which is different. I just never expected to see that again inside a saw.
The Phillips head screws are kind of being outdated with better performing screws.
Although at the same point, if you want to work on it on the job site, everybody's got a Phillips screw around.
Right.
Plus or minus, your call. When we look at the depth gauges on every single one, they're all trying to do something, but I still think that the Bosch and the Skilsaw have some that are silver with a black lining, markings on the inside. Hitachi has a very similar one, but just has it stamped, where Ridgid's is black and has much less on it. As far as beveling, the Ridgid will bevel to 56 degrees, where the Hitachi, the Skilsaw, and the Bosch are all at 53 degrees. I don't know that that makes a big difference. Again, it goes back to...
I don't think it's going to make them stand out and say, hey, we got to have this.
No, the mechanism as far as using it, Bosch and Skilsaw have, and I believe the Hitachi has a magnesium plate where the bevel gauge is built in or molded into the foot of the saw, where the Ridgid has a plate at the bottom that we think is maybe steel or aluminum, and then everything on this gauge is bolted together. So it kind of makes it a little less stable or a little less reliable. When you're using them, you can definitely feel the difference between the Skilsaw and the Ridgid. There's a feel to it of quality when you're using the Skilsaw, and you don't get that same feel when you're using the Ridgid, although the Hitachi fits right in and it works well.
These two saws, I believe, are very, very comparable, especially when you put the Diablo blade in the Hitachi, very comparable. The Ridgid is kind of a standalone. Your do-it-yourselfers, the guys that need a saw but aren't going to use it every day, it'd be a good saw for you.
I think you're going to get more performance out of the Ridgid saw than you would a direct drive off-brand saw.
Yes.
So you'll notice the difference here, but the guys on the construction site who are using these saws on a daily basis are going to see the power. And when you look at the rafter hook, and that's one of the only differences I think that we see on rafter hooks, or the styling cues of the Hitachi, it's at the bottom of the saw. And this probably weighs in as to how the saw balances and how you feel it different, is where they had to put this rafter hook. And it folds up nice on the top. It can also fold down at the bottom, which could get in the way if you were doing a full depth cut, which all these share the same full depth cut at 2 3/8 inches. Realistically, if you're on the market looking for one of these saws, is there a difference in worm drive saws? Hell yes. And if we had the Makita or the DeWalt or the Milwaukee in here, everybody makes them, they may become closer on the higher end. But the reality is, in our minds, you still can't get that Reese's peanut butter cup unless you get the Skilsaw.
You know, the original, they come close to, the competition of them is very close, but in my mind, it's still the Reese's.
And I think that you go and ask a lot of guys on the construction site who have worked on it for 20 plus years, they're so used to that saw, everybody knows the taste, the flavor, how it reacts, what's gonna happen, and it just is there. So can you remake something and make it better? I think everybody's trying, there's no doubt. Ridgid's going for the price point, they're giving you some rubber overmold. There's no doubt that they're hitting that DIY market for somebody who wants to say, I have a worm drive saw, has the power, didn't have to put in the dollars, it's here. It worked good. If you do buy this Ridgid saw, replace it and get one of the tip tracking Diablo blades, awesome. Hitachi's coming out with something that's very similar in feel. The rubber overmold is here, and they changed the balance a little bit. I think that's going to throw someone who is really
slightly heavier.
Slightly heavier, but at the same point, they're trying to get into a market where I think that they will solidify themselves with Hitachi fans, give them a good saw that seems to sound good, has great power. It comes with 2 blades, the Hitachi. Why?
Yeah, because we noticed a substantial difference. I know I'm saying Diablo blades a lot, but there's a substantial difference when we put this blade on this saw. So,
you know, we were talking earlier before the video, why 2 blades? Because 90% of us are gonna say stock factory blade gone, put in the blade of our choice. If you put two Diablo blades in there, I might care at that point that I got a second blade.
yes.
But if I had to, I'll go down the line. I love the DeWalt blades for the FlexVolt, but if I had 2 of them, I don't know, I'd care, because I still usually go back to the Diablo because they're fairly priced and I can get them anywhere. So however you look at this, price-wise, Skilsaw's got the Diablo blade. same price as the Hitachi, who's got 2 Hitachi blades. They didn't have much of a difference cutting. They had more of a difference in tracking.
And I do still think that it frees up a little more power with this blade.
It does. It sounds better. You can listen to all the audio tracks of us cutting different things. We first just started ripping 2x4s, then we added a piece of OSB to get full depth cuts on there. And there's no doubt that you can hear a difference in the motors. And we're not going to even get into their different motor configurations that they say. They all look so similar here. I know there are differences, there's no doubt, but we're not going to tear them apart and get into this one's wound this way, this one's wound this way for cooling. You can see some of the plastic fans inside that they have for cooling on some of the models, where some of it's a little more covered up. And I don't know if that's good or bad in that dust. The one that's the most wide open is the Ridgid, and actually the Hitachi is pretty wide open, but it's got a big guard over it. You can see the plastic fan that's inside. That's just going to whip a lot of dust through here, and you're going to have to be blowing that out with some compressed air over time.
But Hitachi's, for just coming out with this saw, I think it's going to be a great job site saw. Commercial, residential, either way, I think it's going to stand up to the skill.
No matter how you cut it, guys, get the Reese's. Just kidding. You know, there's a lot of options out there for worm drive saws. No matter how you look at it, if you're familiar with them, if you pick some of the higher end brands, I think you're going to be happy, but you are going to see some differences in balance, some differences in power. So take that into consideration while you're pricing these out. Hey, we appreciate your time, so give us a like and subscribe to our channel. We have a lot of different projects that are going on, a lot of different tool reviews, a lot of different tool news. So make sure you do that. Also check out our blog at WorkshopAddict.com and follow us on social media. Thanks for your time, guys. Have a great day.